Hey, I'm Scott,
And I'm Charity.
and we're pastors of Saint City, a church outside of St. Louis.
We've been together over 15 years
And we've been through a lot.
and are going through a lot.
We failed and succeeded,
We've flown and we've fallen.
and we've lived a whole lot of life along the way.
We've worked together more than 15 years in marriage, in ministry, business, and parenting.
And did I mention we have 4 kids, 9 and under?
And if we've learned anything, it's that life is not about the arrival.
It's about all the life along the way.
Hey, what's
Hey.
up? Scott and Charity.
Yeah, we are here together again.
Again.
And if you're listening, you're here too.
Yeah, so we're excited. Last time we were together, we talked a little bit about how Scott and I are wired differently, in case you have not noticed yet.
She's wired so much better.
Well, no,
I
not
think
at
so.
all.
You said that like maybe.
I hesitated.
The way that you said it was like, well, maybe.
Well, convince me. No. But we also talked about how God's made everything kind of to have seasons. And some of our biggest frustrations in life have been whenever we were ready for one season, but we were stuck in another. And I say we just dive into what we're going to talk about today. And that is one of the hardest seasons we went through. And that was a season of infertility.
Yeah.
That we had tried to have babies and it just wasn't happening.
Well, I think that this was one of those things where I always knew growing up that I was going to have a family, that I was going to be able to have kids, be the sports dad, be the story dad, be the fun dad. And I think you always had it in your mind that it was like your duty, like you were created to have children. And so in your mind, when we went through this process, it was tough for you in a different way because you kind of felt like the female body was created to do one thing specifically. And if your body wasn't doing that, like
That
there
was
was
broken.
something wrong. You were broken.
Yeah, and it was really a case of identity. You know, we had talked a couple episodes back before about in my mind, I had always thought, I would go to get my bachelor's degree, then I'd go get my law degree, and I would, be very independent, autonomous before I got married.
And at around 45 to 48, you decide to have a family.
Yeah, just whenever.
When your eggs are all dried up and no good anymore.
But my plan was I always wanted a family. I was from a big family. My parents did foster care, and so there was always a full house. And I love kids. I've always loved kids. And so it was never a matter of me not wanting to have a family. It was a matter of me like kind of wanting it all. And so whenever we got married, that piece
Well, you had an order in your mind of like how you wanted things to be, and I did too. Right? We like had it. We wanted to be together for a little bit, married, and have our time, and then have the other.
Yeah. And so when we did get married, obviously I was not an attorney and I had not finished my bachelor's degree and there was not even any thought about any graduate or anything. And so I was already dealing with a case of identity issue in our marriage. And so I used to be an athlete, was not an athlete anymore. I used to be very involved in school. I was not a student at that time anymore.
Used to be very involved in church, and at the time after we got married, we really weren't.
And so it was literally like every single thing I had considered my identity to be centered around or was excited to step into, each time we reached that, it was like taken away. And so...
Isn't it so interesting that you found out that I wasn't enough?
Yeah, pretty quick.
Well, I didn't replace all those things, folks. And if you're looking at getting married here soon, just so you know, men, you're not going to replace all the plans that she has just because of your awesomeness.
Well, and that was, really something I had to work through is because I did grow up in the church and there was like a very heavy purity culture. And so in my mind, if we did everything the right way, when I get married, it's going to be perfect. And walking into marriage and then realizing, okay, I don't have my degree. I'm not set to get my degree. I'm working full time as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old. I'm away from my family. I don't play sports anymore. I'm not like in education anymore. And so, even more so, I leaned on Scott to get purpose and for everything. And it failed miserably because Scott is a really, really good Scott. He's a really good husband. He's a great father, but he is a really bad God, just like I'm a bad God. And so, coming into the marriage and being a young person, I had to walk through identity crisis pretty quick. I mean, it trickled all the way down to not even know how to act and make friends, not knowing how to act as far as my role as a wife. I am not like the super domesticated, type A wife. And so just feeling like nothing I did was good enough, like I can't do this right, or this is a struggle. And so walking into that through our marriage, I really had to center myself on God before I could even think about anything else. Yeah. And so that was a process, was realizing that you weren't enough and you're never going to be enough. And all those things that I had like prided myself on, they weren't who I am. Because the only thing, like the number one thing that I am is a daughter of God. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us fall into identifying with a group or with a hobby or with a skill or with a profession or with a relationship, and then we're a Christian after that. And anything that we put in front of the word Christian, like, oh yeah, I'm a mom that's a Christian, or I'm a married Christian, or I'm a Republican or a Democrat Christian, or I'm, an African-American Christian, or I'm a white Christian, or whatever that looks like. And I'm an American Christian. That's a big one right now. Anything that you put in front of the label of son or daughter of God is an idol, and it's going to lead you away from fulfillment. And so in the middle of this, we
didn't know originally that we had infertility issues.
Not at all. No.
Because as we got married, I was so bent on not having kids like right off the bat.
Yeah.
That like we did everything we could to like make sure that we didn't end up getting pregnant.
Yeah, we got married very young, and we wanted very much not to be parents very young. I think we both knew that we had growing up to do, and so we literally from day one were using 2 different types of birth control anytime that we were together. And so it wasn't even on our radar that it would be hard to get pregnant.
That would be an issue. And so, kind of just set a timeline a little bit of like we got married, we lived in Northwest Indiana, and then we moved down to Central Illinois. Mm-hmm. And when we moved to Central Illinois, that was where my parents lived, and we both got jobs. I got a job in the electronic security industry, and Charity began working at a local bank as a bookkeeper.
Yep. And so, I kind of felt at that point in time that I was 20 years older than I really was. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that was the whole identity thing. Once we found our home church in Monticello, a lot of that began to get worked out because...
Well, we began to want to have a family because we had some stability in some areas that we previously hadn't. We had consistency in employment. We had a church that we were excited to begin to have a family with. We worked with youth in that church. And then we had stability because we were then closer to your parents, and we were really close geographically to my parents there. And it just began to help us step into a season that we desired things that we didn't desire at the previous season.
And I think some of that was just maturity on both of our parts spiritually. Yeah. We were starting to come out of a really hard time in our marriage whenever we moved down, and plugging into a church honestly was key because the problem that we were having was spiritual. It wasn't anything else. Everything else flowed out from that problem. So once we got on track to being spiritually accountable, to investing in ourselves spiritually, then the relationship became what it was meant to become. And it became stable, and it became a safe place.
And what we found was, especially in this season, when we were around other couples who were following after God and really seeking their own relationship with God for their family and as a community in the church we were a part of, it was like we came alive. And it was like they weren't intentionally, I mean, maybe they were mentoring us, but we very much felt loved and known, and we felt challenged. And I really believe that those relationships with those other families who had kids and were a little farther on their journey began to show us how awesome it was to have a family, and we wanted that.
Yeah, and in all honesty, stepping into that season of our life where we are around these amazing people that loved God, that you got to see them live their life out front. It wasn't, nothing was hidden. Who they were is who they were. It showed family and marriage and having kids in a different light than what we were surrounding ourselves in influences before that. Yeah. Prior to that, our influences were living for the weekend and, oh, you got pregnant, that's a bad thing. That's going to ruin everything. It's going to be a drain. Just a lot of that, like from even our place of employment, that was kind of the way it worked, is that, oh, you got pregnant, okay, and we got to hurry up and get married, we got to hurry up and do this, and then you resent each other. From a lot of, I don't know what it was just kind of our niche of friends, that was kind of or happening, or it had happened. And so you particularly saw having kids when we were in that early part of our marriage as a very detrimental thing, like a very bad thing that you didn't want to enter in, where I saw it as a bad thing because I in no way wanted to have a kid with somebody that was not ready to have a kid. And so I forget who said it, but there is a quote that you've probably heard before, and it says, you show me your 5 friends that you spend the most time with, and I'm going to show you your future. And that was a huge part of us maturing, was getting around influences that were modeling out running after God, and were modeling out what it looks like to have a family, and that kids are a blessing, and being married is not a detriment. It's a good thing, and friendships are good, and you can have purpose in what you do during the week. It's not about just going and partying 2 nights a week. And I think that's why part of the reason we have such a passion for the local church is because we know it saved our marriage. It saved, our lives, really. Plugging in and having community.
And relationships with people who love God.
And who are real people. Yeah. That you're seeing them through the week. They're not one person on Sunday and a different person on Tuesday. And so that really, really influenced our journey. And okay, we're ready to have a family. We've been together for a while now. We see these people modeling this for us. This is a good time. Let's go ahead and pull the trigger. And little did we know that is not as easy as it seems. In purity culture, there's always these looming, don't have sex because you're going to get pregnant and you're going to get an STD and you're going to be alone forever.
And while those are things that happen, that's not the reason why you choose to stay pure. It's not so that there isn't a baby that's illegitimate. It's not so that you don't get an STD. It's what's best. I mean, it's literally
honor God.
To honor God, and it's to save yourself for the person that you're supposed to be with, and keep you from having baggage that you bring into the relationship that creates soul ties that you just can't get rid of later on.
Yeah. And so I think that part of that the purity culture, and I'm all for purity culture, but it can be toxic if it's presented the wrong way. Like you're saying, if the only reason you're not having sex is because you don't want to get pregnant, then you're going to be compromising in a lot of other ways that might not be technical sex, but they are, having intimacy. And so it was literally, I thought, okay, well, we will just stop using birth control and we'll get pregnant because that's how it happens. And we stopped using birth control, and it didn't happen. And it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. And pretty soon we realized, okay, there's probably an issue here. And at first we thought it might have been you because you had a cancer scare right before we met.
Yep. Yeah, and ended up having a surgery that could have impacted my ability to have kids, and so we thought that that's what it was, and so we began the conversation with my doctor, and I got checked, and they were like, "Yeah,
No,
there's no issue with you, buddy."
not at all.
And I really think that one of the things that began to probably become more fearful and make you more anxious was to think that maybe there could be something not right with your body.
Yeah. And I think that it really played on what I was already experiencing, which was identity and feeling like I wasn't enough, feeling like I wasn't enough without having my degree, and feeling like I wasn't enough without having this high powered job, and I wasn't enough without like accolades. And so whenever it turned out it wasn't him, that was a good thing. Like I was happy, and I wouldn't have been upset if it was him. But when it wasn't him, the realization of I can't even have a child. Like I'm a woman. Marriage is for us. We wanted to have children, and knowing how much Scott wanted to have children, and then realizing that, oh my gosh, like I can't even give him that. And so we went, and I actually got diagnosed with something called polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is one of the number one causes of infertility in our world right now. And basically it is an imbalance of our chemicals and hormones that makes my eggs, instead of coming down into being able to be fertilized, they form cysts in the ovaries, and there's never an opportunity for ovulation or fertilization to ever happen. And as a result of that, there were other things that I was experiencing that were all tied into it. So like it's easy to gain weight, it's hard to lose weight. That was one. There was like skin issues that happen. There is mood issues that happen. There's like tiredness.
Never once was there ever a mood issue.
Okay, we're supposed to be telling the truth. Yeah, there was mood issues. And so there was a lot of other things that I had been experiencing that, oh, this makes sense. This all of a sudden makes sense. And whenever I was an athlete, I never had any of those symptoms, but I was always exercising, like, sometimes 3 times a day. I have 2 practices and a workout, and burning all these calories. And so when I went from that to being in a desk job, the whole nature of polycystic ovarian syndrome is your hormones and chemicals don't work right. And so all of a sudden, like all these symptoms kind of started to settle in, including insulin resistance, which messes up your whole body's flow of chemistry. And so we went in, and I had a really good doctor, and she actually specialized in PCOS is what it's called. And she said, I really think that this is probably what you have. And I went in for an ultrasound, and I had like 13 cysts on one ovary and like 15 or 16 cysts on another ovary. And so part of me that was like, oh, okay, we have an answer. This is, at least we know what's going on. So there was part of me that's like, okay, at least we know that it's not inherently my fault. Like there's a name to it. But then there was another part of me that was like, I'm broken. I can't, I'm only, 24, 23 years old, and I can't even give you a kid.
Well, and one of the things that they did was they gave us, when we went into this specific doctor's appointment, kind of like a regimen, like, okay, eat this, don't eat that, be together at this time and do this, and let's just see what happens. And we went through a season where we followed everything to the T, and nothing happened.
Yeah, and on top of that, it was all these, hey, we're going to try these things out. But, just so you know, you also get all the information of, like, it is extremely hard to conceive when you have polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Because in this process of us praying and being in community with other families and sharing what we were experiencing right then, live, with other people who cared and prayed for, we ended up finding out something pretty incredible about our insurance where you were doing bookkeeping.
Yeah, so it was obviously God had his hand in the situation. And like we were talking about seasons, like we were exactly where we needed to be, exactly when we needed to be, because my insurance just happened through my work, because I'm pretty sure it was one of the higher ups they had infertility issues that they had to go through. There was some sort of, it wasn't a rider, but it was like an add-on that covered fertility in my insurance.
Treatments, yeah.
And treatments. And so to find that out walking into this, it was like this little glimmer of hope, like,
Because we knew
okay,
people that spent
tens of
thousands of dollars on this type of care.
And yeah, and then
we didn't have that.
No, we didn't even come close to having that. So hearing that and knowing that, okay, there is a glimmer of hope. So we walked in and, you know, with polycystic ovarian syndrome, a lot of it is trying to control your hormones, because as a result of controlling your hormones, they hope that your female reproductive organs will begin to like cycle the way they're supposed to. So the hope was, by controlling my insulin resistance, like my body resists insulin. So what happens is my body pumps insulin whenever I eat or have, especially if I have anything with sugars or carbohydrates in it. And the insulin keeps pumping because my body doesn't recognize that the insulin's pumping. And so as a result, that gets transferred into body fat. And my whole metabolism doesn't even operate right. And a lot of times I'll even have crashes where my insulin will pump, and then all of a sudden it catches up and my body does recognize, and, you know, my sugar will go way low. Mm-hmm. And so the whole plan was really like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And they actually put me on something called metformin, which is a diabetic medicine, but it is for insulin. And so the whole plan was, we're going to try to regulate your body naturally, and well, not naturally because it was medicine,
right?
But also, this is what you should eat, this is what you shouldn't eat, this is like how active you should be. And I remember there being like several like months and months of us taking the medicine, and I say us because he was with me the entire time, and going through and seeing progress, like losing weight, doing this, doing that, and yet again, nothing. Mm-hmm. And beginning to think like, this is, as far as treating PCOS, this is it. This is what you do.
And then we basically, the doctor acknowledged, hey, everything we're trying is not working. So here's what we want to do.
Yeah, it was almost 2 years.
We want to give you a referral to a fertility specialist, and 1 day a week or once every 2 weeks, this like world-renowned specialist from Indianapolis would come to our local hospital, and we were able to meet with a specific person. And I remember reading articles from this man where he was like the foremost in a specialized area of infertility. Right. And so he asked us, hey, how aggressive do you want to be with this? Like, and he's like, do you want to do this? And we say 10 right off the bat. And he's like, okay, so let me explain what 1 to 10 means. Okay. Yeah. Here's what we look at starting to try, and what we look at. We had
already kind of gone through about 6.5.
A plan. And then this is extremely aggressive, which is like in vitro or surrogacy. There's all sorts of stuff. And so we weren't thinking that. We were just like, hey, whatever the high-end medicine is to make this happen, let's do it. And so he helped kind of set a realistic expectation, but he also began to let us know early on that even though these things are to help that this could be a little bit of a journey. Yeah,
and even letting us know that there's a good possibility this isn't going to work. Mm-hmm. And so we get on this new regimen. It was, weeks and months for us to get the multiple appointments that we needed and to get everything set up. So we finally get to a place where we're going to, step forward. And I think the first thing we started was, I think we were on Clomid for a little bit.
I don't know any of that, but I do remember
that didn't work.
Getting to a point where we had shots, and so I had to go to like this thing where they showed me how to do it, and then I was giving you shots.
And I feel like at that point in our marriage, it was this, I don't know, like this even deeper step that you were with me the entire time. But yeah, they were going to have me take shots, and the shots were called Brevell, and it was actually a cancer treatment medicine that women with breast cancer took, but one of the side effects was they were ovulating. And so the whole plan was to take this like a couple weeks on end, And then I would go in and do an ultrasound, and they would see if my eggs looked like they were ready. And then if they looked like they were ready, they would plan it out and give us a certain day where you would give me an ovulation shot, or 2 days with an ovulation shot. And then we would try to see if it happened. And so it was a lot, but Scott was the one that they actually said, okay, this is what you're going to do. And they gave him training on how to give me a shot. And so I think it was like 3 times a day for weeks and weeks and months. I would come home from lunch or from work, and he would measure out the Brevell and he would give it to me. And it was kind of a roller coaster of emotions, just because it is messing with your chemistry. And so I remember having some like hopeful days, but I remember having a lot of really, really low days. And
really, we ended up getting pregnant
yeah, so
about 2 months into this type of treatment.
Yeah, about that long into the type of treatment. And it was actually, we got pregnant without using the ovulation shot. And so we were ecstatic. I was not feeling great. And I'm like, you know what? Like, let me just take it just in case, because I think they were going to have me come in and do an ultrasound to see, if I was close. And I took a pregnancy test, and there was a line. And we thought, oh my gosh, God just did a miracle. We were ecstatic. We called my doctor, and my doctor's like, that's great. Sometimes this happens. Come in tomorrow. We'll do a blood test. We'll see how far along you are. So Scott came and after work, and he brought me this awesome statue, and it was like a 4-inch statue, and it was like a mom that was holding a baby, and the mom had angels, and he's like, this is just really special, and I'm so excited. And so we celebrated. We let his parents know. We let my parents know. And the next day we went in, and I was super excited, and Scott wasn't. And he wasn't excited. He just kept saying, well, let's just see what they say. Let's just see what they say. And I kept saying, Scott, you don't get false positive pregnancy tests. And that's something, if you've gone through fertility, you don't get false positive pregnancy tests. You might get a false negative, but a positive will show up if there's any HCG in your system at all that is traceable. And so I'm like, I know that I'm pregnant. And so we go in, and we had my blood drawn, and then I went back to work, because that was in the morning. We went back to work, and I'm waiting for them to call, and I'm like, I wonder how many weeks I am, trying to figure out a due date. And they call, and they said, I'm really sorry, but you don't have a viable pregnancy. And I was like, what do you mean? I had a positive pregnancy test. What are you talking about? And they explained that sometimes what happens is, in a miscarriage, that the HCG will it enters the blood first, which is why you can get a blood test before a urine test, and it leaves the blood first. So I was able to detect the pregnancy with the home pregnancy test, because the HCG was still in my system, but I had just lost the baby, because they could tell in the blood that the HCG was going down. It was to a level where it wasn't a viable pregnancy. And I got the call at work, and I was devastated. And it was right before I went home, and I called Scott, and I told him what happened, and he was just quiet, and he's like, it's okay. And I remember going home, and we had dogs at the time, because I couldn't have babies, so I had dogs. And we had a dog, and his name was Bocephus. And it's like he knew. He came, and I just collapsed on our bed and couldn't move. And I don't think I'd ever felt that type of pain before. Just totally like, God, why would you even let it happen? If we weren't going to have a baby, why would you even let it happen? And then even more shame and just the lack of purpose, because hey, medicine made it happen, or here it is, I can't even keep the baby now. And my parents had sent me a bouquet that had gotten to the house earlier that day, and having that there and knowing that, oh my gosh, it's not just me that I'm disappointing Scott's parents, and I'm disappointing my parents, and just feeling the weight of everything. And I couldn't even let my parents know. I had to say, Scott, I can't tell them. You have to. I mean, I could barely talk, and I just literally collapsed in our bed, and I was there the whole night. And there was a lot of asking God why, but there was never a time where I doubted God as far as him being sovereign. Some people get really angry at God when things happen, and I just got angry at myself. I thought, I know God's sovereign. I know that he is Lord over all, but here I am, like, I'm not good enough. And so that stirred up a lot more identity issues that I struggled with. And Scott left for a little bit, just not anything bad. He needed to get some air. So he went out and he took some pictures on an overpass of the sunset. And it was kind of just, I don't know, just summed up kind of what we felt like was happening. And later that week, the pregnancy did fully dissipate, and going through that whole thing and then seeing the physical evidence of, yes, I did have, and almost feeling like I killed our baby because my body was not healthy enough to carry the baby. And I was devastated. You did a really good job acting like you weren't devastated, but it was probably the hardest thing that we walked through. Just because there was no control in it.
And we walked through some stuff. And most of those things were as a result of one thing you and I were doing or weren't paying attention to each other. But this was one of those things where you're experiencing something that's completely out of your control. Like there's no one thing you could do, or you could have done better, or if you would have seen this ahead of time. It was just something that we had to experience, and we just had God and we had each other. But in that moment, to be honest with you, even if we had each other, I don't know if we would have been able to get through some of that without us being close in our church to other people who were able to pray for us and be there for us, and that we had a good relationship with the Lord at that time personally. And if we would have experienced that same set of circumstances in the season we were in previously,
it would have broke us.
It would have broke us.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
God had created, this support system around us to love us and support us through what we were experiencing, and place some people in our lives who had experienced some similar heartache, not exactly the same, but some similar heartache, that were able to just be present. And I can tell you that as I went through that, still being, a young husband, we're still figuring things out, that I knew, as quirky as I can be, as full of answers and suggestions that I can be, I didn't have anything then other than to just be there and be together and hurt with you. And it's still a part of our journey that we understand. But at the same time, we believe that someday when we reach heaven, that we'll actually be able to meet our child. And I think that the interesting part of this season and this part of our story is that when we did continue on and we did push through and continue to pray and wait on God, that when God knew the time was right, that we did get pregnant.
Yeah.
And we did have our first child. And I can tell you that when you get pregnant again after having lost a child, there's a joy and a cautiousness that carries through that entire pregnancy, where you are almost nervous to be ecstatic like you were the first time.
It was terrifying. I remember we ended up getting pregnant after they escalated our fertility treatments, and it was our second round of the escalated fertility treatments that we got pregnant. And they called me and they told me, and I was ecstatic. But then as soon as it happened, there was like this ping of fear, like, okay, is my body going to be able to like protect our baby? Am I going to be able to be good enough? And we had great doctors and everything, and it was, good. Everything was good, but walking through that after losing a child, it was terrifying. And there was the silliest things that I was terrified. Oh my gosh, did I jump on the bed too hard? Did I lay down? Is my shower too hot? Like every little thing you can think of.
You sit too close to that person that was smoking at the park, or
Right.
just
Yes.
all sorts of weird stuff. But
And it's easy to look at it, seeing that that's fear that was setting in now that we're away from the situation. But a lot of times I feel like all of us go through that, where we have a disappointment and then God gives us a blessing and we're almost like afraid to accept the blessing, and we allow it to steal our joy. And
Yeah.
so whether that's a promotion or a move or a relationship, like maybe you've gone through a divorce or a very hard relationship, and God brings something else to you and you're almost afraid to enjoy it, and you're afraid to go all in with it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we were. And so as much as I tried to enjoy the pregnancy and I loved feeling the baby kick, I loved, even when I was sick, I was like, that means that my chemicals are the right levels. When I'm sick, that means the baby's healthy. And so all of that I was okay with, but I was afraid. We didn't do like a gender reveal or anything like that. And we didn't even have a baby shower until like a couple days before we had the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we ended up having our first baby. And in the middle of that move, we moved down here towards the St. Louis area, and we had her down here.
And we named her, and I think she understands this, but at some point when she gets older, she'll know more, that we named her Hope because that's what she was. And I really, I know that each one of our children very specifically was given a name that almost represented
Yeah,
a
for
season
sure.
that we were going through. And I can tell you that our lives drastically changed when that little girl came into the world.
Yeah. And God kind of even gave us a time where Scott was working from home a lot. And so that's not normal. Whenever I had a really, really, really bad labor and delivery. And so I had months where I was recovering. And God just, he turned things to where Scott was able to be there for that. He was able to be there during the recovery time. And it was just like this special time that was not usual for most people's place of life when they have a baby. And so we had moved down here, and at that point, we're like, you know what? She's enough. And if we need to adopt, we'll just adopt, because we had always wanted to adopt at some point
Because
anyway.
when we moved, we also knew that we lost that fertility
Yes.
insurance, and the chance of us finding an insurance or a job that would take us and allow us to jump on the insurance with the knowledge that there was a pre-existing condition of infertility. Very specifically, we were unsure,
Right.
but we had a kid, and that's all we asked God for.
Yeah.
It was a kid,
Yeah. And so, we moved down here, and lo and behold, we got pregnant again with no help. And we felt like we had two miracles.
Yeah.
We got pregnant. It was, let me think, Hope was born in 11. It was 2013 we found out we were pregnant.
And you know what was so weird? I wonder if you remember this. The attention that we were given when we were in fertility treatments during that pregnancy was like every few days. There was like very consistent, specific
Follow-ups,
contact
blood.
by the doctors. And then when you get pregnant naturally, and that's not a part of your process, like the doctor's okay not talking to you for like months. And we're like, wait, shouldn't someone be
Don't
talking
you want
to
to
us
come
about
and
this?
take my blood?
Shouldn't
like, make
we
sure
be
I'm okay?
checking? And they're like, no, you're fine. Like your body's doing what your body's supposed to. And, it was the oddest thing. And so we were almost like learning to experience what other people experience, but because there was so much care involved in that first pregnancy.
It was almost nerve-wracking
It
because
was.
I was always afraid we were going to go to the next appointment and there was going to be something wrong.
Yeah.
But no.
We were seeing the doctor and they didn't even do an ultrasound. Like, "Wait, don't we want to check again? Don't we want to?" And they're like, "No, you're
fine.
you're okay. The baby's still in there." And we're like, "Yeah, but don't you want to make sure?" And they're like, "No, you're okay."
And so December came around. Scott actually got really, really sick that Christmas. It was December 2013. And so I am huge pregnant. Like, I always get huge. I mean, and by huge, I mean, do you have 4 babies in there huge? And so I am, Hope's the only one we had. And so I was trying to like put together her Christmas presents and get everything ready. And Scott was like so sick. He ate some bad pecans or something that a neighbor gave us.
Yeah.
And she didn't wash them from her ground. And so we're pretty sure he got sick from that. And so he was like throwing up in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve stick, where I'm like trying to get him in the shower, trying to give him a bucket. And the next Christmas, he seemed okay. The day after Christmas, he was walking. And then the 26th, my water broke. And we had our baby on the 27th. And her name is Faith Gloriana. Mm-hmm. And she
is a little prayer warrior.
She is a prayer warrior, and she is definitely like, her name evokes who she is.
Yeah.
She'll get mad if she finds out someone's sick and we didn't tell her, because she's like, I could have prayed.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was pretty
she
awesome.
believes it. But let me tell you, 2 children is only the first half of our story. And I can tell you that when we have experienced the ups and downs of seeing what we've gone through, and then God fulfilling something that we have asked him for and prayed for and hoped for, little did we know that God had even more in store for our family journey. We have 4 children.
Yes.
And so we have 2 boys, and we actually, after we had that second daughter, 11 months later, we had our son.
Yes. So we went from having 1 child to on the 26th of
Within
2013,
3 years, having 3 children.
we had 1 child. On the 26th of 2014, we had 3 children.
So here's the thing. I remember carrying the 1 or 2 month old baby into the post-pregnancy doctor's appointment with Charity. And the counter looking at the paperwork, and they said, "We have the wrong file. Says that you're pregnant, but obviously you just had your baby, and this is the wrong." And we just looked, and we were like,
"It's right."
And I probably never had a more serious talk with an OBGYN about, I didn't think this was possible, and we obviously would have never planned it like this. And he laughed and he said, "Isn't it so crazy that 3 years ago you couldn't have kids, and you were like doing everything you could to have a kid, and now 3 years later you're going to be expecting your 3rd kid, and you didn't do anything to have these last 2 happen." And as much as he thought it was funny, a different phase of our story happened, which was, how am I going to take care of my family? How are we going to get through this?
And what did we do?
What did we do? So look, we are going to make this a 3-part series, because it just gets better. Because when you add 2 boys to 2 girls, life doesn't just become a circus. Like,
it's exponentially.
It is multiplied. And to be honest, whenever we show up somewhere, we do look like, if we're not in anything other than a 12-passenger van, like clowns are getting out of the car, because they just keep coming. Yeah. So I want to thank you for joining us this week on this portion of our story that actually is going to have...
Oh, it's just going to get better.
It's a part 2 or a part 3. What would you say?
I don't know.
We're going to have to figure it out. Because this part, when it gets to family and when it gets to kids in our journey,
Gets a little crazy.
It gets a little wild. But we want to thank you for joining us for Life Along the Way. We have been just so blessed and honored to have people telling us that they're enjoying us, sharing portions of our story and our testimony, and some of the things that we just put a little tack in on the map of our life. And we want to thank you for joining us. We can't wait to connect with you on our next episode, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah. See you later.
All right. Have an
Bye.
awesome week.